Hello! Thank you guys for joining us today for our Tuesday regular noon Facebook Live. Today we are going to be talking about multi-dog households. There are so many things that make living in a multi-dog household more challenging. So we are going to run through some of the things that you might experience in your home. Of course, if you have questions for us as we are moving along, please feel free to drop them into the comments and we will be sure to get to them. Because living in a multi-dog household is not always the easiest thing. At the most, we have lived with 3 personal dogs. And then we, of course, have board and trains that come in through our house too. So we are pretty used to managing a multi-dog household, and it is not the easiest thing to do. So we're going to go over my 4 biggest things to think about when living in a multi-dog household, and we'll kind of break those up and go into detail on those. So if you have questions as we're moving through, please feel free to drop those into the comments. So the first thing that we're going to talk about with our multi-dog households is the general increase in energy level and excitement and arousal and motion. The more dogs we have living in the house, the harder, hi Melissa, the harder it's going to be for us to keep those energy levels low, because they all feed off of each other. It's kind of hard to be grumpy when your child or your partner is excited about something, right? You kind of feed off that energy level, and dogs are the same way. So the more dogs we have in the household and the more excited those dogs are, the harder it is for our dogs to relax. For me personally, I allow play in the house, but my dogs are Malamutes. They're 85-ish pounds. And so we don't want rough play in the house because it could be dangerous for us, for them. We've got hardwoods, they could slip. So my general rule of thumb with the dogs is that we can have some calm play in the house and some independent play, but all of our rowdy play is going to happen outside. And then inside, that's kind of their signal that energy levels are a little bit low. But how do we manage that? That's not always the easiest thing to do. So there's a few behaviors that I think are essential for every dog in the household to have if you're in a multi-dog household. One of them is attention on cue. Now, we talk a lot about teaching our dogs how to pay attention. We talk a lot about the name game, which we have a tutorial for on our YouTube page. And this is saying the dog's name and they make direct eye contact. Because if you have attention, you can ask them for other things. Now, the tricky thing about a multi-dog household is depending on how many dogs you have, you don't want to be calling all those dogs by name. So we teach a general attention grabber. So every dog knows how to give attention with their name, but they also know a general one. And our general one is watch. So if we say that cue, the dogs stop and give attention. And then I can give kind of a group cue for wait, or settle, or follow me, right? I can grab the attention of the whole group at once. So a group attention grabber is going to be key. The other thing that we really need to have our dogs understand with a multi-dog household is, hey, Michael, 4 Huskies. Yes, energy level. This one's key for you. So you especially, Michael, make sure that every dog in the household knows how to settle on a mat. So settle on a mat for me is defined as go lay down on your bed and wait there until I tell you to do something else. And it's a really nice way, especially for high energy dogs, to teach them how to chill, how to relax. And we've got it on cue. So if they start getting rowdy, we can do our group attention grabber and then ask everybody to settle and then give them other activities to do. So we really, really like settle on a mat. It's one that we teach and reinforce all the time. And the cool thing about it is once you start teaching your dog that good things happen when they lay down on their beds, they start to offer it on their own. And that gives you more opportunities to reinforce group relaxation throughout the day, which is huge because we know that anything we reinforce is going to happen again. Michael says, I do urban rig racing too. Perfect. So that's going to come in here in just a minute as we're talking about appropriate outlets for these dogs. Alexis says, this is Rue and our never-ending goal. Yeah, relaxation. Yeah, and it's really, really important. And I will tell you that it's harder for some dogs than other dogs. For my older 2, it was a breeze. It was really easy to teach them that off cue. My younger one, we lovingly refer to him as the Energizer Bunny because it took him forever to finally figure out how to turn that off switch off on his own. And now he's like the ultimate relaxation monster. So it's really, really a nice skill that you guys are going to want to practice and keep practicing. So the other thing that we want to focus on with these multi-dog households, which Michael, I was just talking to you about, is how to reduce their energy appropriately. The more dogs we have in the house, the harder it is for them to relax. So we need to make sure as their caregivers that we are providing them appropriate outlets for all this energy. And generally, we can split that up in 3 different ways. We want to focus on training to work the brain. We can do food enrichment, chews, puzzles to give them a little bit of stimulation. And then we want to focus as well on that outdoor kind of physical fitness component. So we really want to make sure, and this energy guideline is very different for every dog. Even same breeds within the household could be very different. Our dog that we lost recently, Jude, his energy level requirement was all the way down here. Lucy and Lennon were all the way up here. So they needed a lot more than he did. And it's important that you look at each dog in your multi-dog household as an individual and make sure that each dog is getting what they need out of it. So Ashley is joining us. Thank you, Ashley. I have a big poodle puppy and a little poodle old man. Yeah, so that's kind of what was going on with my household too. We had a dog that was a little bit older, and so his energy requirement was lower. And my younger two, it was a lot bigger. So we're going to talk about a few things that'll help you out in just a minute with that. So the other thing that we really want to focus on in terms of like managing energy levels is management in the home. And management can come in a variety of ways. It could be a leash tether, a crate, an X-pen, a baby gate, different fences. The key of management is to make it easy for you to prevent the unwanted behavior from happening. So we talk about it a lot with impulse control. Like if we've got a dog that really likes to jump up on the counters and, take dinner off, we recommend using something like an X-pen or a baby gate to keep the dogs out of the kitchen to prevent that behavior from happening. Because when the behavior happens, it gets reinforced. So management within a household with multi-dogs is going to be really helpful because it's going to be easy for you to quickly separate dogs during certain stressful moments, which we're going to talk about later. It can also help you manage energy levels. So dogs aren't perfect, right? They're learning constantly. But if I'm working on managing my energy levels and my younger one is just bouncing off the walls still, if he's around the other two dogs, especially the older one that doesn't want to play, it could start to create some tension in the household. And the younger one is getting rehearsal of the behavior I don't want, which is pestering my older guy. So by using a baby gate or an X-pen, I can very easily, manage by moving the younger one who has a little bit more energy over to a different side of the house. It'll be easier for him to relax if he doesn't have the distraction of the other two dogs there. The other two dogs are going to be much happy that they're not getting pestered. So I'm, keeping that relationship intact. And then if I needed to, I could always give an extra activity to the younger one because his energy need is a little higher. And then I'm giving him ways to more appropriately reduce that energy level without causing problems. Hi, Debbie. Thank you for joining us. So you've got lots of dogs in your house, so this will be really good for you too. The last thing in terms of like managing energy levels that I like to focus on in multi-dog household, impulse control. So we talk a lot about impulse control, especially with our teenagers where they get so excited, they just can't control themselves, right? We see it a lot with inappropriate greetings with people where they might be jumping up and being rambunctious. We might see it in our younger puppies or our teens if they're getting really mouthy and putting their mouth on us when they get excited. We might even see it with things like jumping on counters, darting outdoors really quick. The more impulsive your dogs are, and the more of those dogs you have, the more chaotic your home is going to be. And potentially, it sets you up for some situations where you could end up having issues between the two dogs if they end up going for the same resource, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. So working on impulse control is hard for any dog, but it's especially important the more dogs we accrue in order to keep those energy levels low and to keep the dogs living comfortably with one another. So I like to work on, in a group, work on things like a group wait. Maybe while I practice opening and closing the door, I'll work on group settle on a mat so that all the dogs are practicing a decrease in energy level. And you can even use that as you interrupt play. So you can send them all to play with each other and then interrupt with that group attention grabber, ask them all to settle, reinforce them for, right? Taking a deep breath, letting that energy level come back down before you release them to play again. So there's lots of different exercises you can practice with the dogs individually as well as in a group that will help them learn how to kind of control all that excitement and enthusiasm. So the second of 4 topics that I want to talk about today is that the more dogs we have, the harder it is for us to find time to work each dog individually. And that's the truth, right? We only have a certain number of hours in a day. The more dogs we have, the more individual time we need for training one-on-one. And it can be really hard to kind of decide, well, what do I do with this dog when I'm training this one and vice versa? Training in a multi-dog household is really important, but it can be hard to find that time. So how do we decide what exercises we need to practice one-on-one versus exercises that we can practice as a group? Okay, so my one-on-one exercises, if I have a puppy, absolutely one-on-one. If I have a skill that's maybe a little advanced or complex, like I'm shaping something, definitely one-on-one. If I have a dog who's very easily excited or distracted, one-on-one. If I'm new to training, so maybe you're not a very well experienced trainer, you're just getting into this, everything should be one-on-one because we only have a certain amount of bandwidth, us and the dogs. If I've got a puppy who's just figuring out how to learn and how to bond with me and how to work with me, they don't need any extra distractions like another dog moving around the area, right? They need to just be focusing on me. And if I'm new to training, I don't worry about what this dog is doing and hey, you're getting in the way and hey, stay over there, right? I need to be focused on just the dog I'm training because not only is it going to improve the overall experience for you and the dog, but it's going to improve the quality of the behavior. If the dog is distracted, if I'm distracted, we're not getting as good of quality of behavior as I would like. So it's really important that you are spending that one-on-one time to develop that relationship with the dog and make sure you're teaching reliable behaviors. Now, when do I practice things together? Okay. You can practice things together in more than one way. Okay. And this is where it kind of gets complicated and you need to decide what works best for you and your family. One way you can kind of practice in between separate and together is with a little bit of management. So let's say I've got a baby gate, between my kitchen and my living room. My older dogs could be on the kitchen side and maybe I give them something like a Kong or a bully stick. So they've got something to do and I'm working with the puppy, right? So there's some distraction, but the other dogs are occupied so they don't get too frustrated. And then I've got the puppy. So we're working with a little bit of distraction, okay? Another option could be if you're training something like settle on a mat, where the puppy you're working or the dog you're working is just learning the behavior, but the other dogs know the skill well. You could have them on their mats or on their platforms and randomly reinforce them while you're working with the young puppy or the inexperienced dog. And it gets a little complicated because then you as the trainer need to also focus on, hey, when am I paying the other dogs? And the other dogs have to have the behavior built strong enough that they're able to maintain it without becoming a distraction. So if at any point you're trying that and you go, oh my gosh, okay, the dogs are, breaking from their place before I'm ready, either put up some management like that X pen or baby gate to block them so they can't come disturb the learner, or go, okay, maybe we're not ready for that. Maybe they need a little bit more building on their own. And in the meantime, we'll do some sort of enrichment activity. Now, the other thing is everybody together. So this works really well if work a skill that the dogs have already learned. The tricky thing with that is that maybe all the dogs know the behavior, but they don't all know it to the same extent. So for example, let's say I'm working with my two. I've got Lennon and Lucy. And let's say we're working on a sit stay. Lennon's sit stay is much stronger than Lucy's sit stay because he's had more practice with it for the competition world. So if we're talking about a sit stay, let's say in my one session, I want to work on duration of my sit stay. So I ask them to sit, ask them to stay, and then I'm counting. If Lennon can get up to a 5-minute sit stay, but Lucy only has 30 seconds of a sit stay, when I practice with both dogs together, I have to practice at the level of the least experienced dog. So this means that it's going to be a really easy session for Lennon, and I'm focusing with both dogs on building 30 seconds and up of that sit stay. So if you're practicing a skill with the dogs together and they both know the skill, you still have to practice at the level of the least experienced learner. And with all of this, if at any point you're training with multiple dogs and you're going, oh my God, I'm losing it, this is not going right, end the session, take a break, and reevaluate. It's always better to end a session early than for you or the learner to become frustrated. I see we have a question here from Debbie. At what point do you just let them go wild and let the dogs be dogs? Awesome question. So probably you popped that up when I was talking about energy levels in the households. When they go out in the backyard, again, my dogs are big. My female's 75 and my male's 85. So when they go in the backyard, yes, they can romp around and be crazy and wild dogs. In the house, they have a lot of freedom. You know, they're not normally crated anymore. They've got access to toys and environment. It's not like every time I sit down, they have to be on their settle mats. Every time I sit and do this, they have to be there. They have a lot of freedom. We just don't allow a ton of rough play in the house because I've got hardwood floors and they could slip and hurt themselves. And they're big dogs and they could knock things over and hurt me or hurt them. So outside on all of our adventures, absolutely, they can be dogs, and they can be dogs inside for a certain extent. But when things start getting dangerous, then we interrupt and either ask them to relax based on what I need to do. So if I'm working, then they've got to relax, or if I've got a little bit of free time, I can open that back door and let them run around. Tony, one great aspect of those in-between approaches with other dogs is mild distractions is they can help proof. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when we go out and do anything with our dogs, there's going to be distractions around. So a lot of times if we're working on that group training component where we've got, 2 dogs or 3 dogs on one side of the X pen with activities, and then I'm working the younger one or the more inexperienced one, they get that almost group class practice where they're practicing with other dogs in the vicinity. And it really can help boost the behavior, boost how well they can do it with those external distractions. So yeah, absolutely. It kind of, if they're ready for it, it can help set them up for a little bit more of a real world environment. So my third thing that we're going to talk about today is the relationship between the human and the dog and the relationship between the dog and the dog. So dogs are the same species, right? It doesn't matter if I'm getting 2 different breeds like a Dalmatian and a Rottweiler or a Poodle and a Rottweiler, right? They're still dogs and they speak the same language. They speak through body language. It is much easier for dogs to bond with each other, especially if we're bringing in puppies into the home. It's easier for a puppy to bond to another dog than it is for them to bond to us because we're a different species. We speak a different language. So with that being said, it's really important that you take the time in a multi-dog household to spend one-on-one time with each dog. And this can present a few challenges, which we're going to talk about, but by spending time with each individual dog, you're not only strengthening your relationship, but you're increasing the likelihood that the dog is going to respond to any cue that you give them, right? Because they've got that relationship there with you. They trust you. They look to you for guidance. They have reinforcement from you. So if you have 3 dogs, right, then every once in a while, you're going to need to find some time to practice with just one. So what I like to do when I'm, kind of working with them is I'll pick one area where I feel they need more practice and I spend that one-on-one time with them. Or if there's different things I'm going out to do and I know my dog really enjoys, like Lennon, my youngest, is super social and he loves, people watching and looking at other things. So for him, if I had to run to Lowe's or Home Depot to pick something up, that could be a fun little outing where I take some treats. He comes with me. We work on loose leash walking with distractions. We add in some leave-its, right? It's a fun activity for him. He's also learning new things, building behavior stronger. And that's one thing that he gets to do with me. And maybe my older dog really likes, wading in cool water. And so if I've got 10, 15 minutes and I want to head over to a park and let him dip his toes in, it's not a long hike. It's not a super high active thing that he has to do, but it's something special that he can do. This also applies to people who do dog sports. Maybe my youngest really loves dock diving and my oldest not so much. So you can find different things to do with each dog that's going to help strengthen your relationship with them. Now, when we are doing things one-on-one with the dogs, that also means that a dog or two, however many you have, gets left behind. So we need to make sure that the dog who's getting left behind is not developing any kind of separation stress, because again, they bond with each other more than they bond with us. So if I take Lennon out and Lucy has to stay home, I make sure that I set her up for success by leaving her with lots of things that are going to keep her busy and happy, so that she builds a positive association with me and him leaving versus developing separation anxiety. So I leave them with things like a frozen Kong. I'll turn on some classical music to help keep her relaxed and comfortable. I'll close the blinds to make sure that activity out the front doesn't get her jazzed up and stressed. And of course, I'd make sure that she had a little bit of training or exercise before I left to help her keep those energy levels low and help her relax. It's also really good for that one-on-one time for the dog you do take out, because again, especially with puppies, it's easier for them to bond to each other. So if every excursion we go on, they're always with each other, I bet that you'll see a completely different dog when you go out solo. Because a lot of times they can rely on the confidence of the other dog in the house when they head out. So it gives you more information about the dog and maybe gaps in your training where you need to focus. Maybe you need to do more, confidence building and, exploration of new things with that younger dog versus the older dog who has already learned how to navigate the world alone. So make sure that you're spending one-on-one time with the dogs, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. Find things that you enjoy doing with just that one dog, and that can help you to, want to head out with just one versus the whole crew. And then when you head out, make sure you're setting the dog up for success that you're leaving behind. We don't want them developing any kind of separation stress with being left alone. So Kelsey says, what about crate training with multiple dogs? Do you do it together or do they work each other up? Or is that different than other training sessions like the sit stays? Great question, Kelsey. So obviously, teaching crating is a great skill for dogs to have. We're going to talk about something in just a bit that we need the crates or some kind of management for. And it totally depends. So a lot of times if we're bringing in a young puppy and they get crated by an older dog who's already confident with the crate, then it can help that puppy go, oh, okay, this is no big deal. We're relaxed. I've got a buddy. But we also want to make sure that that puppy could be crated on its own, because if there was ever an emergency or we're doing one of our one-on-one expedition times, we need that puppy to be confident solo. So we certainly want to teach group crating. We also want to teach individual crating. The only time I wouldn't recommend group crating is if one of the dogs does not like the crate, because then the other dog can learn to dislike it or learn stress because of the behavior of the other dog. So if that were the case and we wanted to group train the crates, we would need to make sure, again, that we're working at the level of the least experienced dog, which is the dog who is not crazy about the crate and is a little anxious about it. So it would be a really high rate of reinforcement. But the live we did a couple weeks ago now, on crating, all of those exercises could be done with more than one dog at a time, especially the exercises where you're closing the door and starting to move around. So those would be good things to practice with groups of dogs. Debbie says, do you think that separating dogs, old and young, causes tension between them? Actually, I think that more often than not, it does the opposite. So a lot of times the younger dogs or the puppies are pests, right? They've got high energy level. All they want to do is play. And for older dogs, that can be really obnoxious. And so if you notice that the older dog is starting to get annoyed, then that's a great time to separate them, because if you allow the puppy or the younger dog to continue pestering the older dog, eventually the older dog is going to get really upset about it. So it can actually help us improve relationships by separating. Now, obviously, we don't want to separate them all the time, and we're going to talk about relationships in just a minute. But I do think that separating is an important part of the process. Nina says, "Duck diving Malamute." Yes, it's not as graceful as grits, Nina, but we do get some big splashes. That is for sure. McKelly, this is so amazing. Hello from the Philippines. I love all your webinars. They're so useful. Awesome. I'm glad that they are helpful, and no worries. This will be live and stored on our page after. So if you need to go to sleep and catch it in the morning, you can definitely do that. Michael says, personally, I crate mine in the same room together while I'm at work. Yeah, and a lot of the times that's way more convenient. We do that as well, but I think it is important for dogs to learn how to be confident when they are alone. And so every once in a while, it's a good idea to kind of practice, hey, do you rely on the other dogs for this behavior? Or is this something that you're comfortable with all by yourself? And that kind of plays into how much the dogs are feeding off of each other versus being comfortable alone, because there will be some point where all the dogs you have right now won't be together, and it could be the loss of a family dog. It could be taking some of them on a trip, or some of them to the vet, or maybe one gets sick and has to go to the vet. And so it's just always a good idea to make sure that they're confident and comfortable when they're together, of course, because that's the key of living successfully in a multi-dog household, but also when they are alone. So now let's go on to our next thing, which is keeping dogs in a cooperative relationship with one another. So obviously, if you have one dog, the chances of you having dog-dog aggression issues in the house is zero, because you only have one dog, right? There's no potential for them kind of getting into any kind of scuffle. The more dogs we have, the more chances there are for us to have potential problems. So it's really important that us, as the intelligent human species that we are, set our dogs up for success. A lot of the times I will hear people say, oh, just let them work it out. That's not a good idea, because first of all, it's not the responsibility of my girl Lucy to manage my young puppy that I just brought into the house, right? But it also puts dogs in a compromised position where maybe they have to act in a certain way or increase their arousal or intensity to kind of tell a dog to knock it off. And how that other dog perceives it could be the difference between a dog fight or them learning that, ooh, dogs are kind of scary, I'm not so sure about them. And then we could end up having a reactive dog. So it's never a good idea to just let the dogs fend for themselves. We need to be responsible caregivers and help manage this relationship and make sure that the relationship stays positive. So there's a few different ways that we can do that. One way is that we need to think about potential areas that could be problematic. So things that cause an increase in excitement, things that might cause dogs to show behavior like resource guarding. And generally this is like super exciting times, or high arousal times, or times when there are good resources around. So being proactive is really important in that multi-dog household. And by being proactive, you can help implement a few different management changes that can really help prevent major problems from happening. So depending on the size of your household and how many dogs you have, meal times where the dogs are eating can be a big trigger for problems. It's always a good idea to feed dogs in separate spaces. Crates are a really easy way to do that. And you can teach the dogs, hey, when I go over by the food bin, all the dogs run into their individual crates. And then all the dogs are separated from one another so they don't have to guard their food. You don't have to worry about any fights breaking out. So meal times you want to think about. You could use baby gates or X pens to keep dogs separated. You could use, closing of doors, but generally we want to supervise and monitor the dogs while those high value things are out. And then we pick the bowls up afterwards. So it could be just simply feeding in other rooms, having different mats that the dogs all go to, having X pen spaces, or even crates. And that's a really easy way to be proactive and prevent a problem from developing around food. Another area that can be a problem is when you're eating. So depending on the dog's personality and how much work we've done on, resource guarding and impulse control, when human food is out, that can be another potential trigger. So if all your dogs are relaxed when food comes out, awesome, you don't have to worry about it. But if you notice that one dog gets mad when another one comes near, or they're all kind of inching closer and they're really intense, then it's a good idea to start thinking about management. So this could be using settle on a mat behavior, right? All the dogs have mats and they go and hang out on their mats while we eat. This could be crating them with their food while we sit down and eat. That's an easy way to prevent both the problems at once. And again, all of these things are not problems for everybody, but they can be potential triggers. So it's important to supervise and observe your dogs in your household so that you know what you need to do. Another potentially problematic situation is high excitement play with toys. So some dogs will resource guard favorite toys. My oldest dog, his favorite toy on the planet was a big red kettlebell. I think it was Kong that made it. And it was huge and squishy, and he absolutely adored it. And it was like the only toy he ever wanted to play with. And fortunately, the other dogs really respected his space when he had it. But if they didn't, I could see that being a potential problem. I go to throw that toy for him, which is his toy, and he has lots of reinforcement and drive with that toy. And if another dog went to go for it, I could see him being like, hey, what the heck, that's my toy. Now, whether or not he responded with more intensity than that certainly depends on the dog. But be mindful, especially if you're playing with dogs that you don't know, or if you know that your dog can be a little iffy or a little resource guardy around toys. It's always a good idea to kind of pull those toys up and go for more free-form chase play, wrestle type play, if you're unsure of how your dog will respond, because we want to avoid having negative interactions with each other, and we only want our group of dogs to have positive associations and positive interactions. So sometimes simply pulling up a favorite toy that they get a little intense about is a good idea for that big picture of managing the relationship long-term. Another potentially problematic area with multi-dog household would be using all of our food puzzles. We use a lot of food puzzles and food enrichment in our house to help keep energy levels low, to help give our working dogs some positive outlets so they don't do destructive behavior or become annoying, right? So these are great, but again, if we know we've got a dog that might resource guard food or resource guard toys, then it's always a good idea to 100% supervise when you've got them, or separate. So if I'm leaving the house and I'm giving puzzles to help promote positive associations with me leaving, and I've got food resource guarders, I need to crate the dogs when I leave so that they can have their separate toys, but stay safe from one another and not rehearse that guarding behavior. Could also use X pens or baby gates between thresholds to separate the dogs when you leave, to help prevent problems from happening when you're gone. And separating the dogs when you leave is not a bad idea anyways, especially if you know you have some problematic dynamics going on, because if we're not there, we can't interrupt inappropriate behavior. So if we've got a dog that doesn't respect boundaries, or a dog that is really impulsive and excitable that annoys one of our other dogs, or we have a dog that guards resources, food, space, toys, then separation is key, because remember, your goal is to manage the environment, manage the interactions between the dogs, and get enough reinforcement and rehearsal of the desired behavior so that they start viewing each other as more and more positive things. We want to avoid fights. We want to avoid tension in the household, because that is damaging. So think of it like a bank account. all of these training sessions we're doing as a group, all the fun experiences we're doing, all of the group, can across and bike tour runs we're going on, or the hikes, or the playtime, or reinforcement of settle on a mat in close proximity. These are all deposits into the bank account. And please pause. And all of the hard stares as we're chewing a bone and someone walks by, or growls, or older dogs correcting younger puppies. These are all withdrawals from the bank account. So, and the withdrawals tend to be bigger than all of our deposits. So it's really important that we're managing everybody in the house, reinforcing all the good behavior, and doing our part to help prevent the dogs from being in compromised situations. Melissa says, I have a 1-year-old and 11-year-old who just had minor surgery. Ooh, I hope we're doing okay. When the puppy is too crazy, I crate the older one for her safety. Sometimes she goes in the crate by herself. They are both in there maybe when I am at work across from each other. Yeah, perfect. So you're doing a really nice job of protecting the older one from getting injured. Of course, we just had surgery. We need to make sure everything heals right, and helping set the puppy up for success, because by crating the older one, you are also preventing the puppy from rehearsing that pestering kind of bullying play behavior, which is not something we want reinforced. So really nice job, Melissa. I think that's a great solution for that. Jane, do you think space makes a difference if you're living in a small home with 3 dogs, increases tensions? Yep, absolutely. It definitely increases tensions. The less space we have, especially like with big dogs, the less space they have to give each other and to kind of live with one another. So generally, if we've got 2 dogs that are like in the household that are having trouble with one another, most, not all, but most of the tension will happen either around resources or in tight spaces like hallways, thresholds, doorways. So yeah, having less space in the house can certainly increase tensions. I would be very mindful about where you're seeing that tension to make sure, hey, is this space related or is it resource related? So if we think about resources for a moment, let's say that Lennon is laying down on his mat, chewing on a bone, and Lucy walks by. If my living room is big, she could give him a really big wide berth, right? And the further away she is, the less stress and pressure he's going to feel about her coming near the bone. If the living room is smaller and she walks by, he's going to feel more threatened or more stressed that she's coming closer to him with the resource. So in that circumstance, it's the resource, right, that we're worried about, but having a smaller space can decrease how much, can decrease how much ability the dogs have to move around one another. So yeah, it definitely can. I would recommend, making sure that each dog has their own settle mat, place mats out through the room so that each dog has their own space. If you've got crates, make sure each dog has their own crate so they know where to go. Oh my goodness. Sorry, guys. In that way, every dog knows their particular place to go to. And that can help as well versus them like bumping into each other, find a mat, any mat. They've got a special spot to go to. So that could help as well. Yeah. So Nina says, letting dogs out of crates, kennels, vehicles, tethers, doors is always a big trigger for the herdy dogs. Absolutely, because that's one of those high excitement, high arousal experiences that we were talking about. So not necessarily a resource, but everybody's like, I'm free, right? So energy levels can be really high. So working on relaxation coming in and out can be big. Working on improving impulse control at thresholds so that the dogs learn to wait at thresholds and be released with just their name. If we had a group of 4 dogs in the house, and we used to do this with ours at the back door, you'd have all 3 dogs lined up. You'd ask them to wait, you'd open the door, and their name would be the release for them to get to exit. So they weren't all bumping into each other as they ran out the door, because that was a problem for my 2 boys. But by simply working on, hi, you all have to wait, and okay, it's your turn, now it's your turn, now it's your turn, that really helped decrease the excitement and arousal around the door. And it also helped prevent them from bumping into one another in a tight space, which we knew was a problem. So there's so many different things that can set different dogs off. The biggest thing is that you as a multi-dog owner are going to need to be observant. So you'll need to be able to understand stress signaling, and I can include some links in the description after I close this, to be able to watch your dogs and identify even small signs of stress, including signs that indicate, hey, you better not come near, but also signs of, oh my God, I don't want trouble, right? The look away and the yawn, right? I don't want trouble. That's all information for us so that we can decide, ooh, that just caused you stress. Let's work on that. Or, ooh, that just caused you stress. How can I prevent that from happening again? And again, it goes into us as the owners being able to make sure that all the experiences they have with one another are positive. So Debbie says, is it best to make sure all dogs are on the floor if you allow them to get on the furniture? Does elevation cause problems between dogs? I would say generally it doesn't matter. I think the biggest thing is having clear communication with the dogs. So in our house, the dogs are allowed on the furniture. They also have settle mats on the ground. If we were eating at our couch and coffee table, which we sometimes do, I wouldn't want the dogs on the couch. I'd want them on their settle mats, because I think that one dog being on a couch, one dog being lower, and there being food really close by is just setting them up for a potential incident, which we don't want. So in that circumstance, I've had dogs that were both really interested in what I had and were in close proximity. I think it's easier to just be proactive and, have them both go to their mats. But generally speaking, we'll have one dog on the couch, one dog on the ground. I think that elevation is less of an issue as long as you're being clear and reinforcing the dogs for desirable behavior, which would be, ignoring something exciting or relaxing in close proximity. It's important that we kind of, in those moments, focus on what behavior we do want and reinforce, even with praise. Nice job. That's so good, right? Reinforce that calm behavior so that you can help get more of the behavior we want. My little old man escapes by jumping on the couch. Yeah, and so sometimes for the couch and little dogs, they might seek out, cats do too, seek out higher elevation for kind of a safety purpose, especially if you've got big dogs in the house. Your little dog might feel safer up on the couch. And so maybe we want to let that happen. It's kind of his, whoop, I got to get out of here, safe escape kind of thing. And if we know that he does that, that's a good indicator to then look at the other dogs and go, is there a better way to do this? Like maybe I need to ask them to settle, or maybe they need to go outside, or maybe they need a walk because they haven't had enough exercise. So all of this is just information for us where we can go, is there something I could do better? Is this going right? Are these behaviors I want? So really making sure that we're kind of staying focused on moving towards the behaviors we do want and using management to help prevent all the behaviors that we do not want. So managing that increase in excitement. The more dogs we have in the house, the more energy we're going to have. And even the more energy we need to be mindful of per individual dog, right? Older dogs, smaller dogs might not have as big of an energy requirement as our teenagers or our young working dogs. So making sure that each dog is getting their needs met. We want to make sure that we're finding times to work with each dog individually, to build the relationship, to teach the behaviors that we want and need, right? And then making sure that we're doing that in a safe manner, using management and separating the dogs when you need to just focus on one, or when the dogs are ready for it and they all know the behavior at a base level, start practicing with them in groups, which will help them build a relationship and strengthen that behavior with some distractions. And then finally, making sure that you're protecting their relationships. We don't want to just let them duke it out and, work it out on their own. We want to make sure that we are protecting that relationship, because it's easy for it to go wrong. And that's not what we want. That's not how we live peacefully in a house. So if you notice that one dog's being a bully and the other one's getting annoyed, or we know that our older dog doesn't love our puppy all that much, be proactive about separating and using management. Make sure you're giving that younger, energetic dog lots of appropriate outlets so that we don't have as much energy in the house to kind of pester the older dog. And then make sure that you're finding times to really reinforce that relationship. What things do they enjoy? What things can we do together? How can we reinforce that relationship positively? So there were a few skills that we talked about today in terms of training. After this closes out, I'm going to include links to those for you guys so that you can, if you need to teach, a general watch me cue, or if you need to teach crating or settle on a mat, I'll give you guys the link so it's easy for you to just click on that and find that. I'm also going to include some awesome books because I totally understand that living with multiple dogs is not always the easiest thing, and sometimes we need a little more guidance. So if you want to do a little more reading about it, I'll include links for that as well. And of course, we do virtual consults. So if you need a little help kind of navigating the relationship between your two dogs or your 3 dogs, please feel free to reach out to us and we will be happy to set something up and get you guys on the right track. Real quick here, we see Ashley. Yes, definitely need to manage better for sure. I don't want him to have to escape the puppy. Yeah, absolutely. But that's good info to have. If we know that he's wanting to do that, then whatever happened just before was too much. So if you're observant, you can figure out what that too much was and make sure that that doesn't happen. Or maybe it just happens, frequently throughout the day as the puppy's getting jazzed up. And then we say, hey, what can I give the puppy to help improve this? And then I would really work on, especially because it's a puppy, work on relaxation, because a lot of times dogs being around each other is just like a trigger for play. But realistically, we're not always going to be playing. So working on group relaxation can help your older dog feel more comfortable and confident on the puppy. And it can help the puppy go, okay, just because there's other dogs around doesn't mean we need to be wild and silly. Tony says, do you have thoughts, although this might be a whole separate video, on interactions between your multi-dog pack and others? Yeah, for instance, right after I got the new puppy, the older dog started somewhat aggressively protecting of the baby dog around others at events for a few months until he deemed the puppy big enough to take care of himself. Yeah, so that can be pretty complicated, seeing how dogs interact with one another and how they behave as a pack towards others. It sounds like it has resolved itself, which is great. What I would focus on whenever we're looking at behavior of the other dogs or our dogs in general, remember we always want to look at what is my dog doing? So maybe we were growling or getting stiff in proximity of other dogs. What do I want my dog to do instead? Well, watching quietly would be fine. Sitting, looking away and looking back at me would be great, right? And then we need to develop a training plan that prevents the unwanted and teaches the behavior and reinforces the behavior that we do want. So it's not uncommon for dynamics with multi-dog households when that group goes out together for them to behave differently around other dogs. And people will see it a lot, if they have 2 or 3 dogs in the house and they take all those dogs to dog parks. It's almost like their relationship is different with each other than it is with all the other dogs. And so you can see those dynamics change. But the good news is that we still apply learning theory the same way. We're still going to work on teaching the dog that we do want. And obviously, if we were showing some maybe growling or stiffness in body language, that would indicate stress. So your dog was feeling stressed that others were approaching him or approaching the puppy. And then we would say, okay, how can I make you feel better about this? How can I teach you that I want a different behavior? So we would work through, a desensitization and counter conditioning plan where I would teach a better, more alternative, a better alternative behavior and work on decreasing the dog's stress level and changing that emotional response. So we would want to create a different emotional response that your older dog felt when he saw other dogs approaching. So it definitely, if it hasn't resolved, Tony, feel free to reach out to me and we can maybe set something up and talk about it a little bit more in depth. But yes, dynamics with our dogs or our pack of dogs when we head out, how they behave with each other, how they behave with other dogs around us can absolutely change. But we just want to make sure that, again, we're making sure that we're keeping our dogs safe and helping set them up for success. Awesome question, Tony. Hopefully that has, it sounds like it has. Hopefully that's resolved. If not, again, reach out to me and let me know. So I hope that this was helpful for you guys today. Living in multi-dog households is not the easiest thing, and it requires lots of forethought and preparation on our part. Requires a lot of energy because we have to get our dog's energy needs out in different ways. Requires a lot of training, and it requires us to be smart to make sure that all of our dog's energy needs are met, make sure their training needs are met, and make sure we're really doing a good job at cultivating a good relationship between each other. So like I said, I will edit the description of this live after it gets posted here on Facebook when we're done with some tutorials so that if you guys need help training some behaviors, I can get you links on how to do that, and then some reading material as well. And if you're having a specific challenge that needs a little bit more one-on-one assistance or goes a little bit further beyond what we talked about today, please feel free to reach out to us. We do offer virtual consult, and we would be happy to set something up with you to help you guys learn how to live a little bit more peacefully. All right. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Kelsey. I hope you guys all have a wonderful Tuesday, and I hope this was helpful for you guys. All right. Bye.